Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us for another one of our Knowledge Exchange events, which are sponsored by Virgin Money. So first, I want to say a massive thank you to them. I'm really delighted to be hosting a webinar today, actually talking about some positivity during the last few months about the reopening of retail. It's obviously been a very exciting and very hard-working week for all of those across the country, getting retail stores back up and running. And I'm really delighted to be able to welcome a panel who really span the whole gambit of the retail industry and have some really interesting views, not only on Manchester and the region, but beyond that as well. So we've got an hour for the discussion today, and we are going to really focus on some discussion across with our three panelists. But I just wanted to make you all aware that I think a lot of you probably attended these webinars before, but there is a Q&A button in your toolbar. So if there's questions that you'd like to ask to any of our panelists, then please fire them in there. And hopefully, if we have time, we will then be able to cover off some questions. I say that because having spoken to our panel over the course of the week, I know we have a lot of ground to get through and a lot of strong opinions. So I'm going to introduce our panel first off, and then we'll get into the discussion. So I'm delighted to have join us today, firstly, Vaughan Allen, the CEO of Cityco, which is the city centre management company for Manchester. Vaughan is obviously in touch and responsible across thousands of businesses, not only in retail, but also hospitality and culture. So it will be really fascinating to hear his views on kind of the interconnectivity between the reopening of retail, but also the fact that we're still waiting on next steps for the reopening of hospitality and culture. Danny Simpson, who is the CEO of MIDS Communications, and he is literally on the road right now. So Danny is in the coalface of driving around his network of O2 stores. He is the largest independent franchise of Telefonica O2 in the country, which is 17 retail stores across the Northwest, providing both B2C and B2B services. I think, again, from Danny's perspective, it will be really interesting, to hear how he has readied his team to be out there and give confidence to shoppers to get out into the stores again, but also really interested in hearing his perspective of the town versus city debate, which I know is really kind of heating up at the moment. And finally, we have Tom Royston, who's Associate Director from DTZ Investors. And Tom's main role is really the asset management and redevelopment of King Street. He's leading on the placemaking strategy to really regenerate King Street as a primary shopping and experience destination in the city. So, we've got a great panel, and we've had a week where we started off with obviously Boris Johnson's rallying call to the nation to go out and shop with confidence. We put this though against the backdrop of the May figures from BRC saw an 80% drop in footfall, and obviously while we can be very confident at seeing shops reopening, clearly there is going to be a real challenge around reduced footfall. On a slightly brighter note, the ONS figures have come out today for May trading, and we've seen a 12% uplift in May, largely down to DIY and garden centres. Clearly all of us desperate to do some renovation while we're looking at our four walls. But again, I think these figures are being put out there with a bit of caution. And I think, again, the cues that we've seen at the likes of Primark, since reopening this week, how will that kind of look in the long term? So I'm going to put the first question to our panel, just very simply, how are you feeling after the first few days of reopening? I'm going to come to Vaughan first on that from a perspective of the city centre in Manchester.
Probably quite relieved, to be honest. Certainly over the last couple of weeks, as we moved up to the opening date when we finally got it, we were caught between a bit of a rock and a hard place. Obviously for council, for the health services, they're still seeing a health crisis, so they didn't necessarily want people to be coming back in. Retailers, landlords want people to be coming back in. So how do we promote it? How do we actually get people in, get them in a safe way? So there were two sort of very difficult scenarios. One, on Monday morning, nobody came because they were too scared, or B, too many people came and they overwhelmed what was possible on Metrolink and on our public transport services, which were only operating at about 20% capacity. We managed to get a pretty good balance between those two. Metrolink was at full capacity a few times during the day, but we got people in without too many problems. People were very patient. Foot Locker and a few of the other shoe stores did special launches, which may or may not have been a great idea. Primark did very well. People were patient, they queued, they were in good spirits most of the day. So we were, compared to a normal Monday in June, we were about 50% down on footfall across the city, but on Market Street, we were probably only about 30% down on Monday. Went down a little bit on Tuesday, Wednesday, bad weather, and I think people had got some money to come out and spend, definitely. What we're seeing is lower footfall, higher basket spend, but we're still probably 30%, 40% down, even on the best hours on where we could be, even on a normal June, never mind a good June. Tomorrow is going to be really, really interesting. The weather's good. We'll see how many people come out, see how much they spend, see if some of the transport services are overwhelmed. But I think relief, basically, is my overwhelming emotion.
And hopefully over to Danny, who is on I think he's in a car park now. So Danny, from your perspective, you have literally been out on the road across your network of stores. How's it been for you this week?
Yeah, I think a little bit similar to everybody, and good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for having me. So currently on the M6, just off the services. So yeah, I think everybody started off with a little bit of nervousness, a little bit of anxiety, definitely from a team perspective. You know, we put a lot of prep in last week, and I think that was good. But as the week's gone on, we've built confidence, and the shoppers have been out, which has been great.
Great. And finally to you, Tom, obviously kind of in your role as well of trying to really attract businesses to come in, what's the feeling been like for you in terms of King Street?
Yeah, thanks, Kat. Hi, everybody. I think really I'd echo everything that sort of Vaughan and Danny have sort of said. You know, it's positive. I think, you know, and Vaughan touched on it, but it's really that sort of relativity. You know, there's a lot of challenges facing us right now. And if we compare it to, you know, the same period back last year, you know, clearly things are very different, but we're not. And we're comparing it against the backdrop of, you know, coming out of a lockdown. And I think, you know, people are feeling more positive than they were. And for me, I think that the sort of overwhelming sort of positive element here is an element of certainty. We've been sat in a period of having, you know, a lot of uncertainty. So to be given the dates of reopening, you know, the dates for retail to reopen, we've got leisure reopening at the beginning of July. It's just giving us certainty, and we can build around that certainty, and people can move on. And, you know, everyone wants to sort of have a collective approach of sort of getting through this. So now we've got that certainty, we can sort of look to build upon it.
And I think that's really interesting that you talk about kind of that certainty, but because I think the change and the movement that's gone on so much has been very unsettling. And I wanted to therefore kind of focus in on, we've obviously seen during the kind of lockdown and pandemic, a huge amount of brands have to change and pivot and adopt and go online. And again, looking at some recent figures that came out from Visa earlier this week, showed 65% of people were buying more online, but also 61% said that they would feel less comfortable going out and visiting a physical store. Obviously, some of the figures you've talked about, Vaughan, are maybe kind of not showing us kind of a negative picture as that. But how are we going to really attract people to go back in? And I think, you know, there's been a lot of talk about, does this actually offer us an opportunity to reset physical retail again? So Vaughan, I'll come to you with that first.
I think a lot depends on the sectors, and a lot depends on the type of environment, towns against cities. I mean, you talked about the sort of the 80% reduction that BRC have been talking about. We've seen a bigger reduction than that in the city centre because people are staying local. You know, when we don't have any DIY stores, we don't have an IKEA or whatever. So we've actually seen a bigger drop than that, albeit we've sort of been helped by having quite a large city centre population, which has been staying in the city centre. I think Manchester City Centre, like 3 or 4 of the other big city centres, like the West End, is always going to be somewhat different to smaller towns and smaller cities. And I think while over the next couple of months, it may actually be that we struggle a little bit more because people want to stay local. In the longer term, we're going to have a wider range of brands. We're going to have a wider range of experiences, and we're going to be the sort of place where brands tend to launch their first new store and to test out what is capable and what retail can do. I think what we're going to see is a speeding up of processes that were already underway. So you see a whole, going back to Jessops being taken over a few years ago, where there was an encouragement not to buy stuff actually in Jessops, but you used it as the sort of the Apple experience. If you go in to test things out, and if you've got any problems, and to find out tips and whatever, it's very experiential. It's very about helping you understand the brand, and that's gone through to lingerie, that's gone through to health stores. The Hut Group is looking at a huge experiential store. That whole sort of Apple way of doing things, where a store is more than somewhere where you just go to buy. And I think for a city centre, that's where we're going to go. We're going to go more and more to longer hours, more and more to that sort of interaction of a show is really, really important. I think for us as city centre managers, it's really important that we're getting people into the city, because it's a different experience. I mean, for me, a different experience to going into a mall or a shopping centre. It's more lively, it's more interesting. There's a lot more interesting things going on, and Manchester has its own particular vibe, and we've got to make the best of that. We're waiting a few weeks till we know that things are running smoothly before doing a more formal welcome back to Manchester, we're happy to have you type campaign, but it will be coming in early July, when hopefully we've got through hospitality open, and we can actually start to look to culture opening and actually a much wider offer, which is always what a city centre can bring.
So experience, service, kind of giving people reasons to come back. I mean, Danny, I think that probably mirrors a lot of what the strategies you've been taking and undertaking in your stores as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And Kat, forgive me if my signal goes a bit jittery, because I'm obviously tethering. So if it does, just cut to one of the panels.
We won't blame O2, Danny. Don't worry.
Never at all. Never at all. It would be the technology, not the network. I think for me, we've focused on something a long time ago. I've built something called Retailtainment, which is what we've talked to our teams for a long time, which is about building entertainment into the retail outlets. I think the challenges with the high street over the years. People have had that decision to try and to go online and maybe stay at home because it's been a bit bland. Retailers, they all look the same shops in every town. They've all got the same POS in all the windows. And I think retailers have really need to step up and change. And I think what this process has definitely given us an opportunity likewise to try some new things. But I think franchising in O2 has been great for them as a network, because we're very innovative, we're very entrepreneurial, we're very creative, and we want to push the boundaries of what's possible on the high street. And I think to the other gentleman's point, I think to Vaughan's point is people are staying local at the present moment, but this is an absolute golden opportunity for retailers to get it how you need to get it, to keep those customers coming back to the high street. It's a gift. The high street was in trouble before COVID, and this is an opportunity to keep giving those customers that compelling reason to come back out. If we can make it safe, give them a reason, this could regenerate our high streets locally as well. And I think potentially is going to put pressure on the big city centre, absolutely, if the smaller towns can really step the game up. And I think potentially it's got the opportunity to do that. And through Retailtainment, through a bit smarter, cleverer retailing, giving that compelling reason to come out, you make it bland and boring, the customer's going to go back online. And my journey is getting customers off the clicks back to the bricks this time. And I think we've got an opportunity. If we waste it, we may not ever get this opportunity again.
So I'm going to come back onto the independent point in the high streets, but I just want to get Tom's view as well then on this mix of, I like retail, I can't even say it, retail entertainment, I'll leave Dan on, but the experience, and I think that sings very true to, Tom, what you're trying to do in terms of the end-to-end day experience on King Street as well.
Yeah, thanks, Kat. I think it's really interesting. Danny's just touched on it, and this isn't a trend that's been happening over the past few weeks. Danny used the word years. This shift in the retail sector has been happening for a very long time. I think what's happened more recently is it's accelerated hugely over the last 12-week period. And I think, absolutely, Vaughan said it, that there's got to be a reason for people coming to the high street, and experiential and sort of serviced offers on the high street have to play a very important role in that. I think, gone are the days when people will just come into the high streets, and absolutely, it's formed a key part of our sort of strategy, our placemaking strategy on King Street. We embarked on this strategy in 2016, and back 4 years ago, we were talking about how the shape of that strategy, how we're going to bring people to the street, recognizing that, you know, you need to have it needs to be a retail offer, there needs to be serviced offers on the street to improve dwell time on the street so that people can enjoy those elements and the blends of those elements. And also leisure and hospitality is a really important part of that mix. You know, you've got to have a reason, and it's got to have that all day offer. People have got to be able to spend time there. You want to go somewhere to socialize. We're human beings and want to interact, but you know, there'll need to be an element of shopping. You'll need to have the elements of leisure in that as well. So I think it's really having that complementary mix of uses that make it compelling for people to come to a high street, rather than, you know, using online shopping, which is available to everybody. But you do get a different experience when you come to a high street than if you use the online platforms. So they've got to be complementary to one another, and there's got to be a rationale for, you know, activation to bring people back to the high street. Yeah.
And I think we've actually seen a number of brands go during the pandemic. So, you know, Laura Ashley, Oasis, Warehouse, Cath Kidston, very mass, quite dominant in fashion retail as well. But yet we've seen brands like Boohoo, obviously purely online. Actually, they're going to sweep up some of the Oasis and Warehouse equity. They're also, you know, Hut Group, as Vaughan said, is kind of looking at how it can become more experiential in bricks and mortar. So has the problem been then that we've just got a bit lazy? Some of the old brands have got a bit lazy and haven't had enough innovation, because, you know, Boohoo passing, you know, record numbers. I think Hut Group has surpassed 1 billion this week. So I'd be really interested in terms of the stores that are on the high street, because I think there is a concern that we're going to see a bit of a boom. As you said, you know, people want to go out, people want to spend, people just want a bit of novelty. But are we going to see a complete crash when we sort of move towards August, September, brands and businesses having, you know, utilised all the government support available, and also customers suddenly thinking, I don't have as much money in my pocket to go and spend? So Vaughan, what's your views on that in terms of the innovation and the kind of maybe a little bit of short-termism at the moment and not long-term strategies?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting that all the brands you listed, just as about 6 months ago we had the problem with Carluccio's and Byron and so on, they all have significant private equity investments, and they've all changed hands 2 or 3 or 4 times over the last couple of years. And what that's come to is a situation where they're trying to squeeze out 0.5%, 1% margin all the time. And so any shock, you know, they have to cut costs, they can't invest over the longer term because they've got to pay that equity back in 3 or 4 years. And so it's brands that we've seen struggling for quite a while that have changed hands quite a number of times, and probably haven't got a proven identity anymore. You know, it's pretty hard to you know, Laura Ashley has probably been struggling for 20 years, I would think, at this point. And I think Danny's point was an absolutely great one. You know, you can go online and you can go to o2.co.uk and you can buy stuff and you can get a business service, or you can go into a store and you can actually get that relationship. And I think that relationship with people who are going to help you, and you know their name and you come back to it, it's like the Cheers song, isn't it? It's like, why would I go to retail? You know, because I want to have that relationship. I find it a little bit bizarre, and this probably being an old man, it probably would be, that, you know, you're seeing some hotels, you're seeing some leisure businesses where they're talking about, well, people can enter, they'll be on an app, they never have to see a person, they never have to speak to a person. And it's like, well, that seems a bit bizarre to me, unless you're going for a very particular market, because the reason why you'd want to walk into most buildings is to have that interaction. You know, we operate the hosts, the guys who are out in little fedoras and when we launched those, I think there were only about 3 or 4 cities that had those, including the West End and Sheffield and a few others. I think virtually every city and every town has those sort of street ambassadors now. That's not about safety. That's about having somebody who is a visitor can go up and talk to and have that experience, and actually knows the store managers, knows who's doing an offer, who's got a sale, you know, all of that stuff and all of that interaction. That's why you want to be in a store. That's why you want to be in a city centre and have those relationships. I think it's really, really important, and I think it's ever more important. And those who get it right in terms of building those relationships are going to continue to thrive. And I think that's definitely the case.
So not only then innovation, but actually the human touch. I love the idea of the cheers strategy to retailing. I'm going to remember that one. But Danny, do you have a norm in your business then? I think that's right. I'm trying to rack my brains of who was in Cheers. The human touch then for you, that's so fundamental to your business, right?
Yeah, definitely. I think, our service model has always been pretty simple around, we serve everybody like it's your mum, your dad, your brother and your sister. And I think if you take that approach with them, you get that personalized piece. And, I echo completely what Vaughan has said there. I think, you've got to have that. We've got customers that would return back in store, 82% return rate to store with purchase, because, they know Tom, they know David, they know Leanne, they know Jessica, they know Nicole. These people love the personal service, and then they take the friends and the family to go and see them. So you win business from it, and I think it's that whole philosophy of people by people. And we're all human beings. There's a big rush out there now because we've been locked up, pent up, and kept away from social interactions for 12 weeks. So a lot of it is going to rush to the high street. What you do with them when they come to the stores, well, in my opinion, you can do one or two things. Start to give yourself a personal identity, start to do things differently, and push the boundaries, and start to give that personalized touch. Or we can go back to what I would class, and I'm really apologetic with this one, but lazy retailing. Have you got that in stock? Man, if it's not on the shelf, we haven't got it. I think so many people have invested money to the clicks because, online it was seen as a cheaper, faster, more agile business. Well, the problem is purely when you turn around and look at your own business, you're not agile, you're suffocating in process and policies. You forgot how to innovate. Most of these large businesses, they talk about having long-term strategies. They all suffer from short-termism. They're not agile enough. And I think that's what franchise has been fantastic for at O2. We're fresh, we're innovative. We're always looking at change, pivoting. That's a buzzword that started in lockdown. I think we've been using pivoting for a long time in franchise, and I think for us, this is bread and butter. This is being personable. Is absolutely giving your business a heartbeat, giving your business that bloodline to your customers and the communities that you serve. We've spoke a long time about making sure. I've embedded all of our stores into the communities and wanted to make sure that the store got involved in community projects. I believe if we take a pound in that time, we should be putting some of that back. So whether that's community projects or whatever it is, I think we're heart of that community. The customers, we're very fortunate, and I'm blessed, but the customers choose us, and that's not easily done. That's over a culture and having amazing cultural architects in your business that keep that alive every day for your customers to come and see. And it comes back to as simple as, if we're courteous and we serve every customer like it's our mum, our dad, our brothers and our sisters, we cannot get this wrong. It's impossible to do it, and we have to adopt a different approach. I'm a passionate retailer, and this for me is the rebirth of the high street. We have to get this one right. We cannot get this one wrong. We've got to keep giving them compelling reasons to come back out.
So Tom, rebirth of the high street in terms of, do you echo the sentiment that both Vaughan and Danny have then been talking about in terms of the personal, human, that approach to retailing?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it absolutely is the rebirth of the high street because that trend has accelerated. So, operators have to react to what's going on, and they've got to deliver on that. And again, what we've been talking about earlier, to make people come to the high street. I think your point on innovation is really key, and I think there was a lot of operators that perhaps we're dated and we're traveling in the wrong direction, and there's been really exciting new operators equally that perhaps don't get the press coverage that should be getting, or the praise that they should be getting in terms of innovating. The personal touch is really important, and that is an important element of retailing, and it's got to be a really strong focus going forwards. So there'll be a lot of operators that can really benefit from this going forwards and sort of utilize on the trend. I think also that there's, we forget that the change to online retailing is obviously, accelerating as well, but bricks and mortar really plays a part of that. And, click and collect is absolutely that. You use an online platform, it doesn't get captured, or often doesn't get captured in sales figures that are reported for those physical spaces. But without those physical spaces, you can't facilitate the online platform. So again, they're complementary to one another. So no, that the high street, there is a rebirth of the high street. The high street has to play a really important part of that, and it will do so going forwards. And those operators that embrace that will do very well out of this.
So I just wanted to pick up then, Danny's talked about actually the franchise model and how that's allowed compatibility. I think one thing that obviously Manchester, the city centre and beyond, is very proud of, and rightly should be, is how many independents we have. How are we going to protect those independent businesses in what is going to be challenging times? So even once they've got the people through the door, what can we do in terms of, yes, obviously tell customers to come back and have the confidence, but is there any concern that we end up, yes, with a high street, but a very homogenised high street because it's just dominated by chains who've got the investment to go and be there? So Vaughan, we had a conversation earlier in the week about a butcher in the Northern Quarter, which, you wouldn't have expected 5 years ago even. How are we going to protect those independents who are so important to the fabric of the city?
I think one of the elements that we have very strongly in Manchester, and I think it is mirrored in particularly in northern cities, is, we're actually fairly small cities, but it's very walkable. But within easy walking distance, you can move to your northern quarters, you can move to your Chinatowns, you can move to different areas away from Manchester Arndale, which is mass market, high rent, and it has those brands that you would expect. And I think you can have those different experiences really, really easily. One of the really big changes that we've seen in hotels and in trips over the last 2 or 3 years, and I think this is only going to be increased because of what's happening with international travel, i.e. there isn't going to be any for a while, is the idea of the staycation in cities as well as in the country, that people will come up on a Friday night, possibly from Birmingham, to stay in Manchester, and then vice versa. To go shopping, to go to a show, to go to a really nice restaurant, and actually have that sort of experience. There's no point coming up from Birmingham necessarily to just go to Manchester Arndale because you've got the bull ring. So why would you do that? But actually to have that range of different experiences, I think gives you something that's vital and something that's very attractive. What I think we do quite well, but is something that we need to really work on, is how we create that ecosystem, for want of a better word, that supports some of those independents. So, with Tom's group having King Street, they can take a very long-term view of, okay, it's actually worth having these brands or these brands, working with them over a longer time. They may only have 4 stores, like a Rafa, somebody like that's coming in and going, but this is a really good brand to have. You look at the food retailers who are in the Manchester Arndale market, which isn't part of Manchester Arndale, but they start to be successful. They'll go out and they'll rent bigger stores. Bruntwood do a wonderful thing from Afflex. If you start to grow at Afflex, you then get an accommodation at Hatch. If you do well at Hatch, you might be offered a ground floor retail space in a Bruntwood building. So you've got that ecostructure that really, really backs people all the way up. And I think we're good at that, but I think we've got to get a lot better at that, because there's an awful lot of people who are in Manchester and in Greater Manchester who are, who have food ideas, who are cooking, going to festivals, doing street food or printing T-shirts or doing fashion design or whatever. It's like, well, how do they get that initial breakthrough? They're not going to have a shop front on King Street straight away. But actually, how do we have a way of recognising them all the way through from, tables out on Afflex through to actually being able to rent those stores? And that's how we keep different. We keep a very Mancunian, ideal behind everything at that point.
And Danny, in terms of your experience in the wider region as well, do you think that support of independence and that spirit, a bit, I guess, the spirit of collaboration, which again has been a huge theme during the pandemic, is that something you see and think we could be doing more of to help the indies? Yeah,
definitely. Kat, I think you got a great point. I think you just said a key word there, which is one of my favourite words as well, collaboration. I think, we've got to be together. Sometimes when 10 years ago, when I was just putting a few of the shops out, sometimes we put a location where there was no other mobile phone retailer, and over the years we've had our other networks join, and people kind of saying, oh, competition, how do you feel about that? I welcome it, because it gives you that opportunity to, you've got to work with them. It gives them an opportunity, and more importantly, the fact that you're trying to collaborate with them, that keeps you on your toes. That should be, I need to make sure that I win more than I lose, right? But at the same time, it's about giving that customer the choice, because by collaborating with people and other businesses in that local town and trying to keep us all connected in some way, I think that gives the customer the choice. And when you start having choice, that's what makes the customer to come out. I think it's what you do with those choices, as I spoke about before, the experiences. You know, anybody can have a nice shop front, make it look pretty and put nice things in the window. But if you don't make it come alive, if you don't give me a reason to come back in, well, I've got a pretty shop window online. And you can have a pretty presence online, but it's what you do with it that makes it come alive. So I think choice only comes through collaboration. I think, you know, welcoming and supporting local ones. Just look at the local high street, and, you know, you can walk down, you can see a Costa or a Starbucks, one of the major Costa coffee retailers, and then you see, you know, a small one like Diane's Coffee Shop or a smaller retailer, independent. And, you know, it's great to see them busy because they offer something the Costas and the Starbucks get, and I hope nobody from Costa or Starbucks is on, but what I think you find with Costa and Starbucks is they are very the same. That you go into all the town, all right, they might change the wallpaper and say, well, we're a representation of the local town we're in. That's amazing, that's easy, that's back to lazy retailing. I think what you've got to do is, you know, you go into the local independent. I know Debbie, I speak to her. I know Ben that works behind the counter, or I know the staff that work there, and they know what I have. Is it the usual? You know, when do you ever walk into a Costa Coffee and they go, is it the usual? It just doesn't happen. And I think you've got to be personalised, and I think you've got to put the customer at the heart and the front of what you've got to do. The customer has always been king, always will be king, and if you're a truly customer-led business, then I think you're going to survive on this. I think some people say things just because they're nice things to say and it makes them sound great in an environment. Actions will always speak louder than words. And for me, you know, I think this will be a testing time. I think you will see the high street hopefully reborn. And I think there will be some retailers that will absolutely fly under this pressure and under this environment. And there may be some more retailers that we're yet to see farewell to. But unfortunately, it's about ability to change. It's the agility of that business. And it's about how they collaborate with the competition rather than compete. You know, look at Pro Manchester as a classic example. Sam, Nicola and all the team, they do a fantastic job of working with other networking organisations across our fantastic city to add value into each individual one. They don't compete directly with them and say, no, we're not going to work with you because we're in competition with you. They collaborate, and collaboration is absolutely key. And I think that's going to help independents massively. And we need the independents because it gives that choice.
And look, I want to come back to that because I think when we've hosted a lot of these webinars with different sectors, and there is something unique about the collaboration and the community spirit within Manchester. So I want to touch on that second. I just want to finish off on the independence point. Tom, for you then, strategy in terms of blend of chain and independence within King Street?
Yeah, I think it's really, really important. You know, Danny's used this word collaborative, and it's at the heart of everything that we do in terms of our King Street strategy and trying to work with all of our stakeholders. And it's why we work with Vaughan and the City Co. We work with Manchester Council. We work with all of the other landlords on the street. We work with all of the tenants on the street. And ultimately, in my opinion, the sort of that old landlord-tenant relationship's gone. And very, very crudely, the relationship between tenant and landlord, the objectives are, you know, more aligned now than what they've ever been. You know, landlords want tenants to trade well in these types of locations. Tenants trade well, they create vibrant areas, and that then sort of feeds through to the landlords. So no, I think it's really important. I think there is, Vaughan touched on it, that there's a place in the market for sort of, you know, mass market retailing, and when we look at sort of Market Street provides that, but there's been a real shift also towards this sort of local, more independent type of occupier, and it's really important to our strategy on King Street. You know, we look at some of the if I take the leisure on King Street, for example, we've got some great restaurants that are on the streets, and you know, we've got Tast, we've got El Gato, and similarly we have, you know, independent retailers, and there is a shift towards that within the market. The consumer wants that, and I think that will continue, and those independent occupiers will continue to sort of do very well. So I see, you know, the market needs to have a blend of both, really, and I think independence, you know, what the consumer wants to see. There is a move towards that.
And I think actually, again, you know, research that's come out during the pandemic, brands who have behaved well during the pandemic have supported communities, have helped their customers. People are saying they will continue to spend and prioritise spend with those businesses rather than those who maybe have said nothing or not adapted or just kind of carried on. So it's always very interesting. It's a bit like the voting, intention of how to vote, and then what you actually do, whether people will just sort of sleepwalk back into their habits that were ingrained pre-pandemic. But I wanted to just come back then in terms of collaboration. So how has the retail community in the city and the wider region, have we seen this really working together? Again, I think, as I said, when we've talked to, we had Sacha Lord on from a hospitality perspective a few weeks ago. He's obviously done an incredible job during lockdown in terms of with United We Stream raising nearly £500,000. I think that time and time again, initiatives coming out of Manchester are punching above their weight and and again looking at kind of the interest that they get from not only the public but the media. So what has the collaboration been like on a really practical level? So Vaughan, we'll come to you on that first.
Do you mean over the last few weeks?
Yeah. So as probably we've been preparing to come out of it, and how have people been discussing, enabling, helping each other?
I think one of the biggest things that I think has been the case for a long time, probably for since the last crash, really, when retailers in the city centre and I guess nationally saw the likely impact on local government finances, I think there's probably been more willingness in retail than in most other sectors, if in any other sectors, to pick up some of the slack. So real basic hygiene factors like cleaning your doorsteps, McDonald's taking care of picking up rubbish from all around St Anne's rather than leaving that to the council to do. That is something the council say, well, if you want your restaurant there, you've got to do it. But actually there's a willingness to go and do those sort of things. I think so there's some really basic stuff. So when we started to talk, there were real challenges with talking to retailers, because obviously a lot of the retail managers and all their staff, for probably 80% of the stores, were furloughed. So actually talking to them at any level other than land, board level was very hard. Where they haven't, and they have been working on stuff that, they were working on, how do we make sure that the city looks safe? How do we make sure it feels safe? How do we make sure we get information out to all our networks as well as to them? So I think that real basic stuff is really important. But I think where we've seen a change in all sectors over the last 5, 6, 7 years, it's something that Danny was talking about. And I think maybe it started with some of the property sector, who have always put money into CSR and various other initiatives. But it always used to be, I always used to talk about, they're doing an initiative because it will look good on the front page of their annual report. And I don't think that's the case anymore. People do it because they see themselves as part of the community, and because being green, putting back, all of that stuff is actually what consumers expect, and therefore what the young people working in retail, or young people working in service, expect to work for companies that are doing this stuff. So we've seen fundamental shifts. Retailers, people like Selfridges, have done a huge amount for Manchester Action on sexual health, which works with street sex workers. It's a link that you wouldn't necessarily think, but they brought in women from very deprived areas who are doing a very, very unpleasant job, and giving them spa days, raise money for them, all of those sort of things. Lots and lots of retailers do that sort of thing. Lots what we've seen in the particularly in the F&B sector. The wonderful things that have happened with Eat Well Manchester. Mary Ellen has organised thousands of meals being cooked each week. We had a call on Tuesday or Wednesday from McDonald Hotel. They've got about 500 meals worth of food coming in every week. They're not opening quite when they wanted to, so how do we get that out to deprived people? All of that stuff is now, it's just what people do. It's part of being part of that framework of a city, and feeling that you are part of the community. And I think probably it's I think the positive bit of some of the stuff around the Brexit debate as well is there's a lot more willingness to look, the whole Buy British thing, whether it's food, with all the fuss we're having now about American food imports. But I think, that's benefited a lot of the clothing retailers and a lot of others who are actually working with local suppliers. And I think that will continue to be a huge, huge theme as well.
I think you're completely right as well, in that it's what the younger consumers are demanding. It's not even good, that's a tick box. It's like they just won't shop at places that aren't kind of, and then you rightly put as well, work at them too. So Danny, I think you've obviously spoken quite passionately already about kind of purpose, and giving back has always been part of your strategy. But do you reflect what Vaughan's saying in terms of just seeing that heightened, and it not, as Vaughan said, being sort of a tick box exercise, but just being absolutely fundamental now to have purpose running through everything you do in retail?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, I want to echo exactly what Vaughan said. I think spot on. And I think just to give some examples, what you've seen over the years of this start to change and representation, I've been talking to O2 and will continue to do so until I get it, because I think the O2 local theme is what I've been pushing to them, because, all of our stores have supported local charities, done stuff in the local communities, all the way through from Forever Manchester all the way through to Cash for Kids and doing the toy appeal. It gives people a reason to come in. It makes that store feel part of the community. And let's be honest, the big box retailers, they're smart. Tesco local, Tesco Express, Morrison's local, as all of them, Sainsbury's local. And when you go into them, what can you do? Well, you take the little blue or green chips and you vote it on a local charity that's in their area, because it's an opportunity to give something back. These are things that we've been doing since I started. I always wanted to believe that there has to be a purpose of why. It's not just about profit. A simple 3-tier strand planning strategy. It starts with people, profit in the middle, and planning. That's always been my business plan, about how do you do that. And under the planning, it's about the purpose that sits with that. What are we doing this for? Anybody can sell a phone. Competition sells the same phones I do. They're all much of a muchness. They're all pretty bland. In some cases, it gets a little bit stale and boring. So how do you freshen it up? How do you get into that community and make a difference with something that we're doing? So we're not just supplying a mobile device, as an example. I think anybody with the right setup can do that. And once you're doing that well, what do you kind of do beyond that? And I think we've got to really start to understand what is the purpose. So I think that's one really big example, as the supermarkets have started to go a lot more local and a lot more collaborative, and a lot more personalized with what's going on in the local communities. So I think it's something that's going to keep coming back, and a good strong CSR strategy with something that your people buy into, that makes a difference to that community. We've done things over the years, just wacky stuff, like we've cleaned walls that were heavily done by graffiti, that was a community eyesore, and the community used to hate it. We've cleaned it up, and then we've just kind of put, this was cleaned up by the O2 store in whatever town. So it can be anything that you've got to do. And I think sustainability is absolutely 100% key. As an example, you've all got choices. We could have bought our PPE exactly where O2 was buying it from. We stepped out and we bought our face shields from a company that for every 2 we bought, it gave 1 to the NHS. You've got to just think about these things that are a little bit more sustainable, and then tell your customers that these are the things that you're doing, to make sure that they understand. And I saw an interesting stat the other day that customers are now buying from more sustainability and reliable businesses, people that have got a good sustainability performance tracker. And you talk about British, well, the best one I can give you is Aldi. Aldi are a German business, and all of their packaging has got Great Britain flag over it. Why? Because they want to feel British, they want to feel part of us, and they want us to feel that they're our champion supermarket, and they do a fantastic job at it. So there is one example of how, when you really invest into it, and that's been a massive part of Aldi's success here in the UK, from changing from what would have been seen as a potential bargain supermarket to now being seen as a more of a premium outlet, and everybody loves going for a random shop down the centre aisles of Aldi and Lidl, and that's what keeps drawing them in, right? Personal, different, something creative. Can't go down Tesco's or Asda's or Morrison's or any other of the large supermarkets and walk down. I mean, where else could you literally go to get your local fruit and veg and your biddy shopping and walk out with a tent? You just can't do it anywhere, can you? So I think these are the innovations that we see, and they are golden examples for you to conversations in point that Vaughan very well kicked off. So I think, yeah, absolutely key.
So yeah, I mean, I love coming out with a tennis racket and a garlic baguette. I mean, it's just random, isn't it? But actually, what's interesting is Aldi and Lidl are, it's just been, they're putting loads of money into their online delivery as well. So that, they are taking that blend of kind of bricks and clicks now much more seriously than they were before. I think, again, just to give a nod to a great Manchester retailer as well, Co-op. They've obviously done an incredible job during this period, but I think why they've done such an incredible job is that's who Co-op are. That's what they've always done. That's who they're about. It's about community and giving back. And obviously, you know, we've seen, I will get his name right, Marcus Rashford obviously comes to the fore this week in terms of, again, it's really authentic and it's real and it's caring. So I think this, as you've both sort of expressed very clearly, this move to sort of very authentic and purpose-led comms is something that's really key. So Tom, just to come to you to wrap up on this then, in terms of those more sort of community and purpose-led initiatives, again, is that something that you're really baking into the strategy for King Street as well?
Yeah, absolutely. It forms the sort of heart of our strategy in a way. I don't think you can sort of recreate a place with, you know, whilst ignoring those issues. You know, they become critical. I think, to go back to what we were talking about earlier, we were talking about sort of, you know, the stakeholder engagement piece is such an important part of our strategy, and what we're trying to do as sort of investors and landlords on the street is, we, you know, to look at King Street, for example. We recognise it was once a very great street that you know, we all used to love, and I think it's suffered over recent years, but there's a route we can go down to bring it back to where it was once, but it needs, and critically it needs, that collective, coherent, collaborative approach. And we're the ones that are sort of trying to get behind that and drive that. You know, Vaughan's just touched on a number of things, and it goes right from looking at the street lighting to what the street's like, to even those very basic issues like, you know, collecting the bins and how that's all managed. Because, you know, retailers' core jobs, it's retailing. It's not managing the street and making it a really attractive place for sort of consumers to come in. Again, we look at our strategy and we try and you know, we get involved. We've got the Christmas markets that come down King Street, and you know, it's a great thing for the city, but it creates a bit of an issue for some of our occupiers on the street. So we're there as trying to oversee this and work with our operators on the street, make it work for those retailers, and try and, again, that collaborative approach. Another really good example for us, I think, is you know, we touched on charities as well, and you know, we've been, you know, we do support the Manchester Pride charity event, and you know, last year we brought that down to King Street for the first time, and it'd be something we, you know, we carry on looking forward for sort of years to come. And it's a really important aspect of that sort of community feel, which I think we've touched on, and making sure there is a community. And again, we look at, you know, there's a number of sort of touch points with the consumer, and the other touch points that we've been trying to sort of really push on as well is, you know, we've got a website that sort of communicates to the consumer for the asset. We have Instagram accounts. We also have touch points as well for our occupiers. We have a tenant portal that provides information to these occupiers, trying to coordinate all of that. And as well, we've got marketing consultants, we've got PR consultants that we can provide all of that advice to the occupiers and make sure that there is this coherent, collaborative approach. You know, at the end of the day, it's a community that we're trying to create, and we're really trying to drive that and support that. And that then provides the basis for it to be, you know, a really great street that works well for all those operators, that there is that collaborative approach to sort of make it all work and sort of join it all together, because it needs that overarching aspect to sort of make it happen.
Well, I'm going to actually move to, we've got some questions, so I'm going to move some, and one of them really, I didn't know if this was for me to answer or you guys, about which communication channels do you think will be the most effective at generating interest back for the public to return to the high street. Tom, you've obviously just touched on, you know, Instagram, you know, using your social media, getting people to look at the website. So, you know, is that for you guys in terms of, but equally, you know, the stakeholder management, the conversation with the tenant, all of those, what do you think in terms of that? I'll come to Vaughan again on that, in terms of which communications channels will be most effective for you to get the word out there.
I think you have to hit in many different ways, and you know, I think one of the things that's very much happened over the last 10 years or so, the proliferation of social media particularly, is you've got bigger and bigger markets which are not known to anybody else. You know, the size of the esports market, for instance, is nobody who isn't male and under 25 really knows anything about it, but it's worth tens and tens of millions, which probably affects the O2 business and the game business and all of those things. You look at, I think earlier in the week it was announced that Games Workshop had one of the biggest market capitalizations of any retailer and was worth half the leisure market of the FTSE 250 or something. Absolutely ludicrous. Again, if you're not male, you know, I remember Games Workshop was a brand in the 80s, but Now that's based on a subscription model. It's based on going in and playing games and actually therefore having that consistent involvement with your customers, which you can understand. But that, how you market to those guys, is going to be very, very different to how Foot Locker were talking about a shoe drop on Monday, which had massive queues outside on So I think it's being very, very aware of your market, being very, very aware of your customers, speaking the language that the customers have, not being a 50-year-old bloke trying to run a TikTok account. That's not going to work terribly well, is it? And I think to some extent, you've got to be aware of all of those sort of things as when you're marketing the city centre as well. You've got to try and hit them in very, very different ways. We've taken a very deliberate decision running the business improvement district in the city centre. Is unlike certain other bids, we don't bother marketing it because, frankly, customers don't need to know. They don't care what our brand is. They only care about the retailers and the retail, and that's what we do. Our job is to promote them, so we don't want to confuse it. But we know that one of the restaurants on King Street is going to be an awful lot better at getting to that right audience at the right time than we probably are dictating to them. So we've just got to create that umbrella that allows all these different things to thrive underneath.
Yeah, and the rise of TikTok during lockdown, I have resisted it myself, but I can imagine it's probably going to be a strategy being implemented by people.
I've got 2 preteen daughters, and they spend a lot of time on it. I think it's an incredibly creative. I'm happier with them doing that than doing Snapchat by a long way because it's pretty creative. But actually, it's starting to turn into quite a hefty selling mechanism because you're seeing people in fast fashion. You're seeing people actually do really interesting things with thrift store fashion and stuff like that. And it's done in a really interesting way, and it is starting to have huge influence, I think.
I completely agree, and I think you think back to even a couple of years ago when you were getting served direct to buy on Insta, you felt, oh, okay, whereas now that's just such a natural retail channel for people. Danny, you got involved in TikTok?
It's not for me. I'll leave that one to my son because I think he would definitely kick me off TikTok if he saw me on there. I'm crazy enough in the real world. I think for me it comes back to that collaboration. Omni-channel is the collaborative piece I would use with this one, and I think for me 2 pieces of communication. I mean, for example, it's about how each other complement each other, not take away from the other piece. I think that's still yet to be discovered. Omni-channels, so many retailers have got online competing with retail. The voice channel is then competing with all 3. This should be there to complement each other. In our business, for example, you would start your journey online with retail. As an example, one thing we've launched now is an online booking system. So we know that some customers are going to have a little bit of a concern or maybe that anxiety about coming out. Well, literally go on the website, go onto the store you want, click the appointment time that you want, jump the queue, we've called it. Literally come down rather than stand and wait, come in, go on, book, come into store. There'll be somebody there guaranteed. A concierge will have you waiting into store, straight in and sit down, and it's the complement. If we've not got your device into store, we'll order it rather than come back in a couple of days. We can know when it's going to come arrive. We'll book your store appointment again, jump the queue, come straight back to store, collect your device. Somebody mentioned click and collect before. Click online, collect your store, phone in store. Yeah, absolutely, that should be counted as a transaction for the retailer. In many businesses it's not. For us, it absolutely is. It's an opportunity for that customer to come and have you made the right purchase. So rather than click and collect, it's click and order online. So again, with us, we're operating that system of, if you're not sure about the device, go onto there, request a store appointment, and request that you don't want you're not sure about the device. We'll give you a call. We'll order a couple of devices in, and you can come down and have a look. And then if you want it, then transact. So I think that's one key way. I think omni-channel collaboration rather than again competing. I think it's so many retailers are for me just still confused with the omni-channel experience. Some have got them sewn up beautifully well, but they're sewn up to compete with each other rather than complement each other. And those are the 2 changes I would shift in that. And I think finally the other one is a great piece around how to communicate with your customers is just make sure that you're where your customer wants to be when you need them there. And I think it's about having a different strategy, and again having a different communication strategy across them all. So again, using all assets of your business to work well with the customers. Of course, social media is going to be a big one for everybody, but of course remember the most expensive part in every business is your bricks and mortar and your people inside of them. So make sure that they're the ones also as well that are going to be talking to your customers about some of those other activities that are coming up. You know, we've got a product launch coming in 2 months. Would you like would you like an invite to come and see it exclusive? And you know, those days have sort of fizzled off a little bit. You know, when we had product launches in stores and that experience. And again, you know, just bring your experience to life. Look at Waterstones. They're an absolute perfect business example of pushing back on the digital. Amazon came with the Kindle is here and this is the death of the book, and Waterstones absolutely rode it back. You know, you can't go and meet Ruffalo or the author and get your book signed on a Kindle. So these are the ones that brought that experience back out. And we're talking about, oh, we've got a book signing coming soon. You know, X person's launching a book. They're doing a book signing. Would you like us to add you to the list? That's amazing. Rather than send me another email, which just becomes more boring. We need something more than just, we need a stimulus now.
So really that blend. So I'm just, last couple of minutes, I'm just going to cover off the other questions that we've had. Tom, I'll come to you first on one, which is around kind of, you talked, and I think actually it was Vaughan who made the point earlier around the flexibility and change that we are likely to see in kind of the way we have traditionally opened and opening hours. There is a question here around kind of what's the views on relaxing of Sunday trading laws, and would that be a positive thing again to get people back? Tom?
Yeah, I do. I think that would be great, and you know, I think that should happen. I think, you know, flexibility is key, and I think I was talking about it earlier in terms of those mix of uses and the blend of uses. And when I look at King Street, you know, from a team, our aspiration is to try and achieve a place where you can go very early in the morning. Perhaps you can go to the gym there before you even have your breakfast. You can have your breakfast. You can have a cup of coffee. You can have a meeting in the morning. You can go shopping. You could have a serviced offer. You could go, you know, there might be a beauty salon on the street. There's experiences. Then there's places where you can go and have lunch and you know, you can interact, you can socialize, then going on into the evening and, you know, the sort of leisure aspect of it and sort of utilizing that all day offer. And I think if trading laws could be relaxed and hours could be more flexible over the weekends or sorry, on a Sunday, then I think it would be a very positive thing. So I think the more flexibility, I think the better for the high street. And I think that all has to be looked at for the high street. We need to try and promote the high street, and there are initiatives being talked about, and that is certainly one that could help us and could help all high streets.
So Vaughan, final thoughts from you then in terms of that, in terms of the relaxing of some trading laws to get the stimulus of the high street going?
Yeah, I don't think it's just about stimulus. I think actually it's about an acknowledgement of some of the constraints that we've got at the moment. When you've got public transport only running at 20% of capacity for health reasons, we need to actually spread out that load of punters coming in as widely as we possibly can. So even if you're saying just for 6 months, let's do this and encourage people to come in at different times. You know, we're going to be asking offices to be opening at 7 or opening at 11 and going through to late. Retailers need the freedom to do that as well. Monday morning, Primark was due to open at 8. They actually opened at 7:15 because the queue was there. That was a decision taken by the store manager. Very, very sensible decision. You know, we need that flexibility to do that. Lots of people are going to, you know, the weather, as I said, started with tomorrow is looking good. I think we're going to have too many people for our public transport system to carry coming in tomorrow. And I think that's going to be an issue. If we could say Sunday, we've got 8 hours of trading and, you know, why don't you put it off till Sunday to come? That would help us so much just in getting that confidence back, because somebody being knocked back a couple of times from the trams, never mind the issues for tram drivers and whatever, you know, they won't come again for a couple of months. So I just think it's the sensible thing to do, to be honest. And then, yes, OK, review it in 6 months' time. You know, I think we really need to do that.
So look, I'm going to wrap up there. There was a couple more questions, but sadly, you know, you've all got to go and prep for the hopefully, fingers crossed, busy weekend ahead. So I wanted to just take the opportunity firstly to thank everybody who tuned in. I'm sure you found that an incredibly interesting and varied discussion. I'm sure if we talked again in even a couple of weeks, there'll probably be different viewpoints and kind of things have changed again. But I just wanted to say huge thank you to the panel, so to Vaughan, Tom and Danny. And yeah, thank you very much for all tuning in and have a great weekend.